Today, Google is releasing Nano Banana 2, which is the next evolution of their viral Nano Banana Pro model. Now, this one is special because it's the first image generation model that is built on top of Gemini 3.1. Now, this is not the Pro model, but it's called Gemini 3.1 Flash Image. So this is basically the first glimpse of a Flash model in the 3.1 series. Now, this model, in terms of image generation capabilities, is very close to the Nano Banana Pro version. But this is going to be a lot cheaper to run. It has some new capabilities, including new aspect ratio. You can render images in more formats now. So you're getting all the capabilities of the Pro model at the cost of a Flash model. Thanks to Google DeepMind, I had early access to the model, and I can say it's actually a pretty impressive given how much it costs. Now, let me show you a direct comparison between Nano Banana Pro and Nano Banana 2, so you can actually see how good this model is. Okay, so this first prompt looks at the world knowledge of the model. Now, in this case, I said create a photorealistic image at these coordinates. This is the location of Eiffel Tower. And then I provided the original inauguration date at noon. And then we are asking the model that the scene should reflect the historical accuracies of this location on that specific date. Now, since it's trained on top of Gemini 3.1 Flash, it actually has enough world knowledge that it is able to figure out that the coordinates belong to Eiffel Tower. The rest of the chain of thought is very similar to Nano Banana 2 or Nano Banana Pro. So basically it goes through its chain of thought very similar to what we have been seeing from Nano Banana Pro. Within the chain of thought, you will sometimes see that it generates images, which is the ability that the original Nano Banana Pro had. So based on that, it took about 19 seconds and came up with the final result. Now, in terms of the composition of the image, it seems to be accurate. Also, if you look at the attire and clothing of the people, they also seems to be accurate for that historical period. Now, in terms of the actual arrangement of the other buildings, I am not sure, but we do see some historical buildings within the image. I used the exact same prompt with Nano Banana Pro, and here's the representation that we get. Now, because of the nature of these image model and the large language models, every time you run the same prompt, you will get different results, right? But in terms of quality, both of them are very similar, especially for this specific prompt. But since it's trained on a large language model, you can ask follow-up questions. So I asked it to label all the historical buildings in the image, and it does a really good job at it. So based on the original image, it put labels. So we have the Eiffel Tower, we have the original palace, we also have the temporary exposition archway, right? So everything seems to be accurate, which is pretty good. Now, one selling point of this model is that you're going to be paying a lot less compared to the original Nano Banana Pro with a similar level of quality. Okay, here's another prompt that tests its ability of spatial understanding, also its counting capabilities. I asked it to arrange 7 macrons in a perfect circle, each with different color, starting from red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. And the arrangement should start at the top in clockwise direction. And then we wanted to have a card in the middle with 7 wonders in a gold foil lettering. So this is the generation out of Nano Banana 2 or Gemini 3.1 or Flash image model. It's a mouthful to say. So I'm going to be referring it to Nano Banana 2. Now, in terms of the instruction following, it actually does a really, really good job. It has 7 macrons As a comparison, here is an output from Nano Banana Pro, which is Gemini 3 Pro image model, right? Very similar outputs from both of these models. Now, very similar to Nano Banana Pro, you can use it for mockups of your products. Now, something I've found this to be really good at is text rendering. So in this case, we are asking it to create a film festival poster for World Cinema Festival 2026. And we want 3 different languages: English at the top, Japanese in the middle, and Arabic at the bottom. Each language should use an elegant TypeScript to it script. And here's the output that it generated. So we have the English label, then Japanese. I even like actually the orientation is perfectly aligned. And then there is Arabic. Now, another prompt that I tried to see whether it can collect data from the internet and use it in image generation, I asked it to look at the market capitalization of the top 5 most valuable companies in the world, create a bar chart. The title should be the $1 Trillion Club. So it did Google search, and here's what it came up with. So we have NVIDIA at the top. It also was able to include logos, which is pretty nice. Then you have Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, and Amazon. Okay, so according to Gemini, this should be the order. I was a little suspicious. So Alphabet or Google should be 3rd, and Microsoft should be 4th. Now in here, it messed it up, but I think it's probably coming from the search results rather than the model's ability to render the data. Okay, so I reran the same prompt, and now the ordering has changed. So now Google is on 3rd, right? So again, I think this is driven by the search results rather than the model ability to generate images. Now, text rendering is something that it shines a lot at. I also wanted to see how good this is at using tools, because you can ground the results in Google search. So I asked it to create a technical architectural diagram to show how Anthropic's Claude API works. And it needs to have message flow, system prompt injection, tool use loop, and safety filtering usage. Now, it looked up documentation on Claude.ai, and I think also a couple of other places. But here is what it came up with. Something I want you to pay close attention to is that in general, when you have a lot of text on images generated by these image generation model, they usually render or mess up the text. This model doesn't seem to do that, right? So this diagram that it created seems to be technically accurate. Now, we don't know much details about the actual internal working of the Claude API, but from a technical standpoint, this seems to be a correct rendering of a technical diagram of an Anthropic or any other API. Now, looking at it more closely, it seems like it might have messed up something here. Now, in terms of text rendering, it can actually do pretty complex images with a lot of text. So in this case, I asked it to create a professional recipe card of classic French croissant. It needs to include multiple different items. There are a total of 7 different items with precise measurement and 6 number steps in small readable text with nutritional info in terms of calories, fat, carbs, and proteins. Okay, so for the same prompt, on the left-hand side, we have the output from Nano Banana Pro. On the right-hand side, we have output from Nano Banana 2 or Gemini 3.1 Flash image. Now, in terms of the accuracy of the content, it actually followed the instructions. So we have the prep time, cooking time, and yield. Same here. Then we have 7 different ingredients in both images. They are kind of similar items, right? Because we are making a croissant. And then we have the detailed instructions. And I think both of them do a really good job at this. I don't really see any problems with either. Overall, you could pick either. And that's kind of the point, that you will see minimal differences between the images generated from these 2 models for relatively simple prompts. But something that this new model is really good at is text rendering. A no image generation test is going to be complete without a comic strip. In this case, I asked it to create a 4-panel comic with the text that you can see here. A couple of things. It actually does a really good job with character consistency, and it places text where exactly I want it to be. Now, in the original prompt, I said small text at the bottom. This is why we can't have nice things. In the generated image for this variation, you can see it has the same text twice. So one is the character is saying, this is why you can't have nice things. And then there is a small label in here. Like, other than this, it's actually really good at its instruction following. Now, here's the output from Nano Banana Pro for exactly the same prompt. Again, it's following the instructions, although I think Nano Banana 2 did a good job at rendering the store or coffee shop. But this model does a better job at following instructions, and because it's able to place the text exactly where we wanted it to be. Now, here's another prompt. I wanted to see whether we'll be able to render buildings in specific styles. We have a lot of details in terms of how we want the structure to look like. Also, within that, I wanted it to render text. So the house number is supposed to be 42. And then a Tesla Model 3 is parked in the driveway, right? And is what Nano Banana 2 generated. And Nano Banana Pro does a very similar job, basically rendered the same thing. Now, interestingly enough, the structure remains very consistent with the prompt in both cases. Now, this was to test how it's going to deal with unrealistic situations. So I wanted it to create a hyper realistic photograph of a transparent glass grand piano sitting in the middle of a shallow coral reef. It's supposed to be an octopus playing the piano, and we want the tentacles to be correctly positioned on the keys. And there's supposed to be small tropical fish swimming around the piano, right? And we also want the piano to be branded and named. I would say it does a pretty good job at that. So we have the piano brand here. It's underwater. There's sunlight coming in, hitting the surface of the water. The octopus is trying to play the piano. Now, right now we see only 6 tentacles, but if you look at the reflection, it seems like there are a couple more. So this seems to be anatomically correct, right? So it does follow your instruction, and I think it generates pretty good outputs. Now, I showed you some examples in terms of the quality for simple instructions. The main differentiating factor is the pricing. So the pricing that I have seen, which is not confirmed yet, is relatively cheaper to the Nano Banana Pro. Now, I'm not going to put the pricing here because Google DeepMind told us that there's a potential that they are going to change. So I'm going to put them in the video description, a link to the page where you can actually see the current pricing. Anyways, do check this out. I think you will notice really good performance to cost ratio for this model. And let me know what your experience with this new Nano Banana 2 is. Anyways, I hope you found this video useful. Thanks for watching. And as always, see you in the next one.